So here we found ourselves again with two Prusa machines that now are more similar than ever. The Mark IV, when I reviewed it, had a preview version of input shaping. It now has a final version. And the Mini, being a 3-year-old printer, now got a input shaping preview version as well. And in the coming weeks, that's going to turn into a final. I discussed this with Stefan on the Meltzone podcast, going like, hey, these share an electronics platform essentially. Could they put input shaping on the Mini? And I was like, sure, why not? So they did just that. The thing though is, when I reviewed the Mark IV originally a couple of videos back, the input shaping implementation that they had on here just wasn't convincing. Like, let me bring out these test parts. These are low poly models, so they have very sharp edges everywhere, and it's just super muddy, super messy. They lack any sort of definition. Yes, they were super fast to print, but also they don't look very good. Like, any sort of polygon texture on the face here is just completely rounded over, and this looks like mush. So that's sort of what I want to figure out today. Has the input shaping firmware on the Mark IV improved since I last tested it? And are they making the same mistake with the Mini, where they're releasing a firmware that isn't, up to the standards of what you would expect from them? This also is a brand new printer. Prusa reached out after I released my Mark IV review, and they were like, this is not the sort of results that we're expecting to see. Can we have a look at your machine? And I was like, sure, if you want to swap it, sure thing, I'll send it back. So this is brand new. They now have my original review unit. This is running the final input shaping version. We're going to flash that back. I'm going to show you that process, and we're going to flash this to the preview input shaping version. And all this is brought to you by today's sponsor. For these tests, I'll be using the Pearl PLA from Material for Print, made locally right here in Germany. But they don't just make beautiful PLA, they've also got highly functional materials like their static charge dissipating ESD PLA and PTG, tough and high temperature materials like ASA and PCABS, and a carbon fiber reinforced PET that does a bit of everything and comes with a unique surface finish. Their standard spools are compatible with the Bamboo AMS, and if you need an extra large serving of filament, you can order everything with up to 8 kilograms per spool. Get 10% off your purchase with code TOM_10 at the link below. There we have the whole family lined up. I'm also going to include the Mark III, which is, by today's standards, a really old machine. The reason is that I just want it as a baseline. Anything, especially the Mark IV produces, should be better in quality than what this old boy is doing. So whether it's input shaping or not, this always needs to beat this. No compromises there. I've got the filament loaded up. We're going to do the Pearl Blue on the Mark III and on the Mark IV, and anything that's this Pearl Violet, same filament, just a slightly different shade, is going to be from the Mini. One thing I've already noticed on the Mini versus the Mark IV is just how snappy this screen is. This feels like gaming on 120 Hertz versus, the Mark IV, which is more like 30. All the menus take a huge while to render on this, versus here it's just instant. It might be because it's a screen that's much smaller and lower resolution on the Mini, but yeah, in either case, this actually feels a lot better than the Mark IV. It's still the same functionality on both though. Well, nothing left to do than to start some prints. Okay, the prints from the Mark IV look glorious. Absolutely, these look pretty much perfect. But the ones from the Mini do look a bit scuffed, and these are the ones done just with the standard print profile. You can see sort of at the chest area here and at the neck. The layers, they're just super inconsistent. And I've done 4 test prints by now, trying different fixes. I swapped the nozzle, I did a bit of mechanical maintenance, looped the bearings, tightened the bolts, but it's just not going away. This is the newest one, and it just looks awful on here, to be honest. This looks very, very bad. So I've done a bit of digging, and it looks like the issue might be the PTFE tube that's built into the hot end of the Mini. This is a PTFE hybrid design where it's the Teflon tube that goes to the extruder, the Bowden tube, and then there's a little bit of a Teflon tube built in that goes just barely not into the heat block. So it should not be heated, but apparently that can cause some issues as well. Now, that's what the internet was saying that the issue might be, but if we actually look at what our part looks like, you can see that like there are some extruder issues, clearly, and they're very periodic. Like this is printed in one go and it's bad, it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad, and so on. This looks very periodic, so my guess would actually be the extruder. To settle this and to see whether the internet or I am right, I'm gonna try another test print. I've already done 4, so you know, what is one more test print? I am gonna try to swap the PTFE tube, and if that doesn't fix it, I'm gonna service the extruder. Oh, this? Well, I've not been going to underground fight clubs, and if I was, I wouldn't be telling you about it. It's just that my bike decided it wanted to introduce me to a freshly sanded bike path violently, and yeah, yeah. My face looks a little worse for wear, so we're gonna stick with the hands for now. So, no worries, this is okay. Kinda hurts, but it's fine. Okay, I thought I could just push through, but these hands just weren't cooperating, so that's why this video is late by a week. I'm sorry. Anyway, that was a couple of very satisfying cold pulls. You can see, you know, I cold pulled the entire heat break right there. And one thing I realized after Shane from Prusa reached out, I thought I had to remake this heat break, as it, you know, this end is pretty crimped down and it looks like it's worn. Also, this thing is too short by 0.5 millimeter. But since you're going to have to adjust the height of the hot end anyway to make sure it makes good contact with the PTFE, you can actually just flip these end for end, because both of these ends are machined in the same way, and just plonk them in like that. And that should fix the problem. So I'm going to remount this, and then we're going to do another round of test prints. But yeah, down in here, I don't know if you can see it. Maybe if I turn the exposure up. Yeah, right there, maybe right in there. Yeah, that's good. This is now all nice and clean, so this should be good to go. Let me just move this down to 0. This is the 0 position for the printer. The height of the Pinda probe, or the Finda, whatever it's called, probe, hasn't changed. But you can see just how much further up the hot end is now sitting, just from clearing out the gunk and from reseating the PTFE. I had loaned this printer out and the guy had to do some maintenance because I think he wrecked the fan. But obviously he didn't reinstall the hot end correctly. That's pretty obviously gonna cause some issues, so I think this should be fine. And yeah, no worries, I am recalibrating the Z height on this. Yeah, that was the ticket. This is before and this is after, and clearly these prints have improved by a ton. And that's why I generally dislike PTFE lined hot ends, because they can cause so many different issues that are so hard to diagnose. So yeah, this is our baseline print for the Prusa Mini, done with no input shaping, just the stock firmware. Let's have a quick look at what the Prusa Mark IV did as well. And this is the one done with firmware 5.0, the one that supports input shaping, the final one, but input shaping not enabled in the slices, so it should be printing just stock standard settings. This looks very, very good. This looks super clean. Now basically I need to go back and retest some things. With the Mark IV, I'm going to need to test the beta input shaping firmware and see if that is worse than what we have now or the same, and just, you know, the machine is now better. There might have been something wrong with the original review unit. I'm also going to go to the non-input shaping firmware before all the alpha beta stuff on the Mark IV to see, you know, if this machine is capable of printing this cleanly with the older firmwares. And of course on the Mini, we are going to upgrade to the input shaping beta or alpha at this point firmware. Let me show you that upgrade process real quick. So if all you want to do is to upgrade your firmware to a recent version, you go to the Prusa website, you plug in your USB drive that you have your regular print files on as well. You download the firmware file, drop that onto the USB drive, hit save. There we go, that's downloaded. You do need to unzip the file that you just got, like that, where you have the BBF file. It's the same with the alpha and preview firmwares, for example, the one I'm going to flash to the Mini. Those are available on GitHub, And under the releases section, assets, you just have the same BBF file that goes onto the USB drive. And when the stick that you have in your printer has a newer firmware on it than what is already installed, the next time you boot it up, it's either going to automatically flash some stuff, or it's going to ask you, hey, what do you want to upgrade? Of course, for downgrading the firmware, as I want to do in the Mark IV, this process doesn't work because it's already running a newer firmware version than what we have on the drive. So for that, there is a little bit of a trick. So you hit reset and you immediately double tap, and it should bring up the flash firmware screen, even if this has an older version on it than what's already on here. Ah, there we go. That was it. This is like trying to get into your computer's BIOS. You just keep hammering the button and all of a sudden you've confirmed that you want to wipe whatever. But this seems to be working. Okay, so this is going to be running the Alpha 3 version, which, if I remember correctly, is the same preview that I used for my initial review. I'll be reprinting the input shaping files on the Mark IV. I'll be reprinting the original files, the original G-codes that I used in that review. And on the Mini, of course, I'll be doing the input shaping preview prints that I've already sliced. Okay, more printing. Doesn't look like homing is working on this preview version. I'm gonna try a complete factory reset and see if that helps. I don't have much hope here, but let's see. Hard reset everything. We're gonna reflash everything. I'll report back. Yeah, the Mini with input shaping goes pretty good. Alright, I think that is quite enough printing. As you can see, I moved on to printing mostly the low poly wolves now because they show everything that I need to see, and these are a lot faster to print than the full set of the wolf, plus the locking pliers, plus the Lilith head. This is like a full day. You know, you start at night, this is not even done the next morning, and then you print the entire next day. So that sped things up quite a bit. I don't want to waste filament either. Now, quick reminder, all the blue parts are printed on the Mark IV. There are a couple Mark III parts in here as well. And all the purple parts, the purple parts, are done with the Mini. Let's start out and try and answer the sort of the initial question with the Mark IV. Was input shaping in my original review just bad because it was a preview, or is this an issue with the machine? And I can confidently tell you that yes, it has improved quite a bit. So this is the print from the review, basically from the review machine, and this is what we have now. And you can see, like, the original print looks like it's been put through a photocopier a couple too many times, and it's just blurred out and washed out, and you know, it just looks bad. It looks like a very poor quality print. This one, on the other hand, this is done with firmware 5.0 on the replacement machine, and this looks good. Doesn't look perfect. There are a couple ringing artifacts around the neck area here, but overall this looks like a very good, very respectable print. Input shaping on the Mark IV has greatly improved to a point where I would say this is perfectly usable. It does cut down print time significantly versus using the standard profiles, and it doesn't really look bad. Also, there are now new printing profiles that are, you know, specifically optimized, if you wish, for structural. This was all done with the structural profile. There are also others that print faster, if you so desire. Now, the next question for me was, why? Why does this machine now print better than what I originally had? This is not the same machine. Again, this is a completely brand new swapped machine from Prusa. The old one got sent back. So was it an issue with the machine, or was it a preview issue? And I sort of did two things here. First of all, I tried the same firmware and the same G-code as I did on the original print. So let's do that again. And it looks just as bad. It looks just as washed out and blurry and low detail and warbly, like you can sort of see that here, as before. So if you flash the same old preview firmware to a new machine and use the same preview slicer G-code, then you're getting the same bad results even on a brand new machine. So the machine was not at fault. This was just because everything was still in preview. So the last question, of course, there is, was it the firmware or was it the slicer profiles? Because both things changed. So I printed the same input shaping G-code on 5.0 on the finished version and on the Alpha 4. This is the same G-code, the same slicer, and you can sort of see they look, well, it's probably hard to show on camera, but these look absolutely identical. There is no discernible difference in quality. They both have just a tiny bit of ringing going on, but overall these both look good. So it's not the firmware, even though this was on the alpha and this was on the final version. So really what it comes down to, what changed, is the new slicer profiles that were introduced once this input shaping thing went into the final version. So this sort of confirms what I've always said, like the slicer makes so much of a difference, especially now that the slicer also sets a lot of printing parameters internally, like all the input shaping stuff, that can be controlled and fine-tuned from the slicer without the machine itself changing at all. But there is a noticeable change between the non-input shaping firmware, which is 4.7.2, and the 5.0.0 version that supports input shaping, even if you don't use input shaping. And this is what I find quite interesting. So these are the two prints done with no input shaping enabled in the slicer. So again, this is the same G-code, just printed on the older firmware and the newer firmware. None of these are supposed to have input shaping enabled. The G-code says it's just standard, but the old firmware has a bit more ringing, a bit more edge overshoot, and the new firmware is just absolutely smooth with no issues at all. So even when you don't enable input shaping, I don't know if the firmware has, well, pressure compensation is also enabled. So that might be it. But yeah, the new firmware, even if you don't use input shaping, does print better. And this print, to be honest, this is just the standard on the 5.0 firmware. This looks extremely smooth. All the edges super crisp, and there's just almost no ringing or anything visible anywhere. Honestly, this is one of the best 3D prints I've ever seen. And yeah, this is the standard profile on 5.0. I guess all the other stuff they added did improve the non-input shaping experience as well, which is good. I think that's a good thing. Doesn't cut down on print speed, but with input shaping and with newer compensation algorithms, you always get that choice. Hey, we now have a more capable software framework. You can use that to speed things up and to drop down to the same level of print quality again. Or you can stay at a slower print speed and just get better prints. And I think both things are good. But yeah, still the preview version of this was pretty borked and pretty rough. This is a lot better now of an experience with input shaping or without. The speed gains from input shaping, from enabling it in the slicer, are not quite as drastic as during the alpha phase, if you go for the structural profile, as I did, which I would recommend. But it's still faster than printing standard, and there's really no quality drop anymore. So that's good. I'm going to use input shaping on this from now on forward. Yeah, and those weird artifacts on the lever here that looked like there were microstepping issues are completely gone. So moving on to the Prusa Mini now, and again this was all done with the preview build of Input Slicer, which is from a 5.1.0 alpha something. I did the full set of tests again. I did the baseline after figuring out why my machine was printing so poorly. So that is what it looks like, just fixed and good. And yeah, it's not printing quite as nicely as the Mark IV. You can see some lower frequency ringing stuff going on, but this is okay in the grand scheme of things. Enabling input shaping though, there was a significant drop in quality. You can see how much more ringy and just noisy all the surfaces are. This does not look good. Like, look at that. That's just, no. I tried to get the Mini to a more acceptable level of ringing. The first thing I did was to tighten the belts. This was what Prusa support suggested with my Mark IV when I pointed out I had some printing issues. And well, the tight belts actually made it worse. So this is the part just with belts in their stock tension, which I felt like was okay. And this is with the belts completely tight. And yeah, this completely changed the printer's kinematics apparently. That wasn't it. So I went back in the other direction and I loosened up the belts to a point where I was like, well, this is maybe a bit too loose. And it actually looks better now compared to the stock print. There's still more ringing going on. This is the input shaping one. This is the stock print. And it doesn't look as bad as with the belts completely tight. Is this print good enough? I don't think so, considering that there is a noticeable drop in print quality from a printer that already has a couple of noticeable, print quality flaws. I don't think this is good enough. It sort of loops back to the original issue that people pointed out, where these machines don't have accelerometers built in. They have no way of knowing what the printer head is doing, what the bed is doing, how they're currently behaving. They cannot measure what the dynamics of the system are. They have models, they tested them at the factory, they can test a couple printers and say, hey, this should work, but out in the field, belts might be different, they might be worn, tension could be off. However, one thing that I did notice that is now being addressed is the fact that these are moving bed printers and that the weight of the bed changes as you print stuff onto them. These are fairly light prints. Now what the slicer does is it adds to the G-code little tags and tells the printer, hey, at this point you have an extra 74 grams of weight on the bed. And I don't think the printer is doing anything with that yet, but it could. It could change its kinematics model and account for that extra weight, which I think is a good thing. Another thing that I noticed that the slicer is now doing is between the original sliced files that I did and the newer input shaping files, which is one of these, is that wherever you have an overhang, like down here, it applies a dynamic speed to it. And the preview input shaping version was extremely aggressive with that. Like, you could see every little polygon had a different speed, which of course doesn't make for the best printing results, since the printer constantly has to change speeds up and down. Now there's a much more gradual change in speed, and it looks like it's not quite as aggressive anymore. So that, I think, might also help with a smoother print result, especially, in the overhang areas. So where does that leave us? Well, I think with the Mark IV is in a good spot. Of course, it's still not a Core XY. It's never going to hoon like those printers. But, the input shaping, well, that's the wrong printer. The input shaping now works. It now prints well with input shaping. It saves some time, and you have the choice of going no input shaping with a quality or a structural focused profile, or just going all out and pushing the printer to its limits. I think user choice is always a good thing, but like I said, this isn't going to break any speed records anytime soon. On the Mini, however, well, we're in the same spot as with the Mark IV review again, where this is all preview software, so it might improve, it might not. There might be some inherent issues with the printer that you can't just fix with a software update, but currently, we're in that same spot. I can't recommend using input shaping yet. It just completely knocks down your print quality to a level where I would not be happy using these prints. So again, look at that. This is not great. And it depends so much on belt tension. So I hope this was helpful. This was quite a lot of printing, quite a lot of work for me, trying to figure out what is going wrong exactly. And yeah, we learned a thing. Thank you to all the patrons and YouTube members for making this entire thing possible. Thank you for watching. Keep on making, and I'll see you in the next one.